Hey everybody, thank you so much for logging in, taking a look today. Thank you for Pedal the Cause for the opportunity to do this and bring a little bit of what we do into everyone's home. Before I get started, I just want to mention Pedal the Cause really helps support the Cycling Cancer Center and the Cycling Kids at the St. Louis Children's Hospital. Huge shout out and thank you to True Refrigeration. I don't think there's a chef in the country that doesn't know True Refrigeration and appreciates the reliability that they have. We all have pieces of it in our kitchen. With that said, my name is John Dalton. I work for Hamilton Hospitality. And you may know us by our other restaurants, 1111 Mississippi, Vin Dissect, Hamilton Steakhouse, PW Pizza, 21st Street, and Moulin Events has 15 event spaces. I'm the director of sales with the company, and right now I'm filling in as the executive chef for Moulin Events. I wanted to do something a little different for you today, and that is we are going to actually cook some steaks. We're going to grill them, and we're going to pan sear them, and then we're going to make some compound butters to go with them. But I'm hoping what we'll accomplish today is that everyone's going to feel comfortable cooking a steak at home, whether it's on your grill outside or if it's on the stovetop as well. So all of the steaks today that we're going to cook are from the center part right here. Now there are plenty of great steaks all over here, but for grilling or pan searing, you want to start out with a pretty tender steak. So I have 3 of the famous steaks today. This is a tenderloin. When a tenderloin is a whole piece of meat, that's a whole tenderloin. When you cut a section out of the middle of it, about 16 to 18 ounces, that's called a Chateaubriand. When you cut a steak out of it, it could be called a filet mignon. If you cut it even smaller, it could be called a tournedos. And if you cut it even smaller, it could be called a medallion. So there's a lot of different marketing names for this. So now we're going to go on to the next steak, and I'm sorry to say there are not many names for this steak, except for Kansas City strip, New York strip. All has to do with the little lip and the little tail that's on the end, but they're fairly identical, and this comes from the loin section of the animal. This here is the steak that's cut out of the prime rib, which is called a ribeye. There are 2 different parts of this meat. There's what we call the eye, or the Manhattan, and there's this piece on the outside, which is called the spinalis. But these are really great cuts of beef. So all this really needs is a little bit of salt. So I'm going to put a little bit of salt on this. I'm going to get the spinalis and the Manhattan and all the fat. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to kind of do the same thing as well. And then I'm going to let this sit for about 10 or 15 minutes. It's going to get more room temperature, which we like, and that salt is going to go in there. Before I actually cook this steak, I'm going to pat it dry with a towel so that when I cook it, it's going to cook beautifully. So now I'm going to open up this strip steak as well. You can tell how flexible it is because I left this out and I wanted it to be a little closer to room temperature. Don't leave it out for more than maybe an hour and a half, but an hour, 45 minutes, that's a good amount of time. And you see how beautiful that steak is. So again, I'm going to take my kosher salt, nice and just a little bit. We can always add a little bit later. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to let this sit for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm going to get my towel and I'm going to dry off this steak so I have a nice dry steak. This ribeye has a little more fat in it. This strip steak has a little less fat on it. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to cook the ribeye on the grill, and I'm going to cook the strip steak in a frying pan. But since I'm putting it in the frying pan, and since there's really not too much fat on this steak, I'm going to take a little chunk of butter and I'm going to just smear it on top of here, right? So I've got my flame on. I don't want it all the way up, but I want about a medium high. That's a tricky one to say. And then I'm going to put my pan on top. I'm going to let this get hot for a little while. And then I'm going to come over here to this grill. Now I use a pretty special pan spray. And the pan spray, you can buy really great pan sprays in the supermarket. Always stand back a little bit when you're doing this because there might be a little bit of flame. And there you go. So here's the tricky part, especially for most of the men in the world. So every woman out here will understand this. I am going to put this steak down, and I'm not going to do anything for 2 minutes. Nothing. And now I'm gonna move over here because I think my pan is hot enough. I'm gonna take this steak. Now remember, this has a little less fat than what we had in the ribeye. This is the strip loin. I coated it with just a tiny bit of butter, and I'm gonna stick it into that pan. I wanna hear a little bit of a sizzle. I wanna hear that, so it's gonna give it a nice crust. Remember, in this pan here, a little bit of butter is gonna help you get a nice char on the outside. So we've been with our steak over here for about a minute and a half. Now, how do you tell whether a steak is done? Well, you can do that touch thing that everyone talks about, touching parts of your hand. I prefer that, or you can stick a thermometer in it. The problem with sticking a thermometer inside of a steak, it's good for roasts, it's good for things you put in the oven. As soon as you stick that thermometer in, you pull it out, all of the moisture exits the steak. So let's just leave it alone. Let's go with my internal clock. Now, I'm gonna break my own rule just for a minute, and I'm gonna get some really cool restaurant grill marks on this. So I'm gonna pick this baby up. I'm gonna put it down at a 45-degree angle from where I had it before. As long as you control a certain amount of that flame, you're in pretty good shape. So I'm gonna go back to this steak over here. There is no reason to rotate this steak because it's not getting the grill marks. So I'm just gonna let it continue to cook. So I'm gonna take this steak off. How beautiful that is. Now I'm gonna put the other side down. We're gonna walk back to the other side of the kitchen. And that is not really as dark as I wanna be. So I'm gonna put that baby down a little bit more. I'm kind of thinking I'm about rare right now. Maybe I have another 30, 40 seconds on this. And I'm gonna put this over here on this board, and I am not gonna touch it for 3 minutes. And we're gonna take a look at what we got in our frying pan over here. So there's more of a char that I want. Not exactly what I want, but I tell you what, I'm gonna hold this up for a minute or two. I'm gonna let that pan get really nice and hot. And then I am gonna throw that back down. I'm gonna hear that sizzle. So I made some steak butter earlier. This is roasted garlic. I didn't put any salt in it. And I'm gonna put it on top of this gorgeous steak after it's rested for a minute or two. I'm gonna make a blue cheese butter. I'm gonna make it really simple. So whatever you have in your fridge, whatever you have left over, caramelized onions, cheddar cheese, blue cheese, I'm gonna put it into here with butter. I'm gonna smash it around a little bit. I'm gonna go over to this gorgeous steak that I've got. I think we got a good steak there. What do you think? Now I'm gonna move this over to our resting board. I'm gonna let that sit. I like blue cheese, so I'm gonna put a nice amount on there. And I'm just gonna let that sit for a few minutes. So let's see how successful John was in making this steak rare. I think we're on the mark. So I would consider that a good rare steak. Nice in the middle, nice distribution. And as I said earlier, we have the spinalis on the outside and we have the Manhattan on the inside. This is probably cooked a little bit more than this right now, depends on the texture of the meat. But that is a pretty tasty little steak right there. So I'm gonna open this baby up, and that is, I don't think that's blood rare, but I think that's rare. I think we got a decent char in the pan, and I think we have a really nice steak. So, what to do on a hot summer night? Get your steak, let it sit out for a half an hour, put a little salt on it, dry it with a towel, make a little steak butter if you want. You don't even have to put anything into the butter, it can just be butter, it's that good. Grill your steak on the outside grill, do it in a pan as well, 2 to 3 minutes on each side, depending on how thick that steak is. Turn it over once, pull it out, let it rest for a few minutes, eat it. Again, everybody, thank you for True Refrigeration, thank you for Pedal the Cause, thank you for all the charities that you support, and I appreciate really the support that everyone's given us during this really tough year, but it's with great people that support great causes that have helped keep us above water and keep our employees employed, and for that we thank you.